Thank you so much for having us today. I'm Tina Lee. I'm the editor-in-chief at Unbias the News. This is Ope Adetayo, and we wanted to tell you a little bit about a project that we worked on last year called the Sinking Cities Project, which was our attempt to kind of try to do climate journalism a little bit differently. So I'll spend a moment telling you a little bit about the project overall, and then I'll hand the mic over to Ope to tell you about a case study, which is Lagos, Nigeria. So one of the reasons why we decided to take a different approach to climate journalism is that in our office, among my team, we're watching amazing, really beautiful stories being told from different international outlets where people go to a different country, kind of zoom in on different things that are happening there, and often tell the story from sort of a 500-foot level, in the way that you can do when you go to another country and report on the things that are happening there. And we've seen really beautiful stories that result from these, and really interactive ones, really creative ones. But one thing that we were kind of missing is the active voice. Who's making the decisions that make these things happen? When you tell stories from this kind of outsider perspective and above ground perspective, you often say, if nothing is done within 25 years, this city may be underwater. But if nothing is done, by whom is one of our questions. Me and my colleagues, I'm from the East Coast of the United States originally. One of my managing director is from Nigeria. My other colleague is from Pakistan. We knew that there are actual individual decisions in place that are making people's lives more difficult. And we also knew that there are people who have the opportunity to do things differently. In some cases, they're advocating to do so. In other cases, they're not doing anything. So with the Sinking Cities Project, we thought, why not get locals who live in these cities to actually report on it and see if the outcome is a little bit different? Because we think that local journalists are the ones who know who's in charge, right? Who's to blame, who's making good decisions, who's making bad decisions, and also the context of why those kinds of things happen, which is just the sort of thing that parachute journalism, as important as it often can be, cannot as easily accomplish. So for the Sinking Cities Project, we took 6 journalists from Alexandria, Dhaka, Dublin, Lagos, Karachi, and Rotterdam, and we invited them to come collaborate together, receive training. Farrah Warner, who's here in the room today, I think was one of our trainers. We talked about solutions journalism, we talked about IPCC reports, international treaties. What are the obligations that the cities have? What are they doing and what are they failing to do? As a result, the journalists had to research things like saltwater incursion, political movements for and against climate change action, the solutions that are on the ground that can actually be used. And I wanted to mention that we had wonderful illustrations by Walker Gawande. At the end, we had this project that kind of gave this overview of how different cities all over the world are doing or not doing climate change. For instance, in Alexandria, a city that was almost destroyed by flooding many, many years ago now faces the same issue, but because of the fact that they want to privatize more and more of the sea, sell off more of the ocean to private contractors to make attractive real estate developments, there's not only the fact that people in the city have much less access to the ocean, but there's also the fact that there's much less being done to make it a public good and to protect the public as a whole from the threat of sea level rise. In Dublin, a wealthy community who naturally wants to keep their beautiful sea views is taking up the space that would be required and all the money that would be required to actually make a seawall that would protect the rest of the city if the sea level does rise. And then in Karachi, Pakistan, the government's taking action to make sure that water can go through the city by knocking down the homes of the poor, which inadvertently has created a major political movement for climate change and to actually ask the rich to do their part. These kinds of local stories are the ones that we thought we could get better by actually making sure that journalists are from these places, have the context to report on them, and have the ability to name names. And what we show, what I think you can see from all these stories, is that it's not this natural phenomenon that is passively taking place. There are decisions that individual people are making right now for social, political, historical, and economic reasons that are making our future more dangerous. And you can call these people out. And I think climate journalism should. So now I'd like to hand it over to Ope to talk about a case study of Lagos.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Ope Adetayo. I was a journalist on the Sinking Cities project, and I investigated the situation in Lagos. Um, so Lagos is the economic engine of Nigeria, which happens to be the biggest um, economy in Africa, and it has this ironic position of being the smallest city and at the same time being the most populous city in the country. More than 20 million people, are said to live in Lagos. Actually, we don't even have a concrete figure, but the projection is there are 20 million people living in Lagos. And Lagos is a low-lying city, approximately 2 meters just above sea level, and that's like its highest point, which means its topography is susceptible to, ocean surge, coastal erosion, and whatnot. And because of climate change, there have been heavier than usual rainfalls that are causing, that are aggravating the flooding situation. So, because it's a low-lying coastal city, um, there is a lot of flooding annually, and with the increase in rainfall engendered by climate change, we have like more than usual rainfall. The government refused to hand me the data of rainfall when I was investigating this story, right? Currently, according to the government, at least 12% of the city experience flooding disaster annually, and this simply means, a large area are going to be flooded. And if you look at the word disaster, last year, if I recall, I think about 8 people died and thousands of people were displaced by rainfall caused flooding alone. So this is Lagos. 40% of Lagos is covered by water bodies and wetland because basically it's an island on its own. So, and this brings me to the question of how is the government paying for sea level rise? So when I talk about this thing, I usually like to start with a story, a very brief one. So last year, I was fresh out of the university and I was looking for an apartment, and everybody gave me a piece of advice not to look for an apartment um, in February 2022, and I asked why, and everybody kept saying, "Why don't you wait till it starts raining?" And I was like, why? So if the apartment or the area will be flooded. And, we were 6 months away from rainy season. I couldn't wait. I needed an apartment to live in. So with faith, I got a place and I had to wait 6 months, to actually find out if my house was going to be flooded or not, right? And what I did during the search was simply to like cancel out flooding prone areas, and that was like more than 70% of the city. So that left me with just 30% of livable area to live. And if that is my story, what's more for the other 20 million people who are living in the city who cannot make this choice to live, elsewhere than these places? So there are two parts to this story. There is the wetland and there is the coastal erosion. Um, ac- so for to actually get a perspective of what is happening in Lagos is to draw you back to what the government thinks of the city itself. So because Lagos is essentially the cash cow of the country, the government is obsessed with making it quote unquote a mega city in the mode of say Dubai, Abu Dhabi, New York. So the government is quite obsessed with building, these exclusive urban residential areas, metro railway, which are actually very important, but it is this kind of idea is clashing with the needed preparation for climate change. Um, so the idea of a Lagos megacity in its current manifestation is primarily designed to cater for the comfort of the rich while hiding the poor. We have a classic example, which is called the Eco-Atlantic City. So it's thousands of acres reclaimed from the ocean to build this mega super rich community for for the uber rich, while the millions of people were cleared away from the waterfront. So we have a lot of examples like that, and the attention to a holistic adaptation and mitigation approach is scant and solely directed towards rich and upper class area. So what the government does is when they build these communities, they protect them from coastal erosion, from ocean surge. So the city, Atlantic City I mentioned has a 1.8 kilometer long ocean wall that protects it against, ocean surge, ocean current, and whatnot. But the problem, which I found when I was doing this story, was that this wall, which is just one of many, deflects the surge back, elsewhere, and it actually obliterates waterfront communities which are being currently inhabited by poor people. So essentially, the government creates these exclusive areas, build a wall, scientifically proven to withstand, whatever climate catastrophe for the next 500 years, while simultaneously obliterating communities, waterfront communities for poor people, and this is clearly, the manifestation of the idea that the government has about the city. It has to be a mega city where you don't see the poor, where you only see the rich, and where it's only livable by a few. And this takes me deeper into the wetlands and why we commissioned a satellite project, to look at these wetlands. Wetlands are the protective barriers, are the natural protective barriers within the ecosystem that, when you have the ocean soak, it soaks the ocean soak. So it's basically called the climate sponge, right? So it holds the excess water from the other water bodies and releases it when it's time for it to be needed. And Nigeria as a whole has, you very well. Nigeria as a whole has 13 wetlands protected by international legal framework, which is called the Rama list. So it's the United Nations objective to provide to protect wetlands. But Lagos is not among those wetlands because, for whatever reason, in the 1970s, the state government refused to, submit itself to this legal framework. And this lack of protection means that the government can easily go into these wetlands and do whatever they want with it without having any legal repercussion. But when I was doing this project, and I wanted to know what is happening to the wetlands, how much of it is left, one stunning revelation to me was that the government itself had no idea of the percentage of wetland we used to have and what we have now. And it was very difficult for me to do my story, my investigation, because without this data, I don't know exactly, what's at stake or what the larger picture is. So we had to commission a satellite imagery to look at this wetland.
Go on.
Um, can you go back? Can you go back, please? So this brings us to the question, because no data, and why is the government telling them? I think I've been able to answer that because we need more lands. Like I said earlier, Lagos State has that ironic position in Nigeria to be the smallest and at the same time the most populous. So there is not a bit actually, a lot of population pressure because according to the data, 4,800 people migrate to Lagos every single day. So there is a lot of pressure to create residential areas for people. So the government they feel they have no other choice than to make an incursion into this wetland. So for them, they don't even see it as a necessary, ecosystem material. They see it as a wasteland.
Should I go the next?
Sure. So this is a wetland in a place called Akoka, and so And in 2013, you could see these are the wetland, the green area. But by 2022, you have 90% of this particular wetland gone. The next slide. So 90% of it. So these are residential areas that have been built on. They are out in the current. This is Aja Etiosa in Lagos. This is 2021. In 2012, you could see the wetlands here. But in 2021, 90% of it is gone. So we keep building into it. Why? These are the protective barriers for us against flooding. These are okay. So okay, so that's for the wetlands, and there's another phenomenon that I investigated for the story, which is the coastal erosion, right? So, like I said earlier that when the government creates these walls to protect, the exclusive residents, it deflects the surges back to places like this where poor people live, and it increases coastal erosion. In some places in Lagos, the communities are entirely gone. Where people used to live 10 years ago, you can't find it again because coastal erosion has eaten, deep into the community, and they have to migrate to essentially, these people have been displaced. I looked at a place called Alpha Beach, which is on the other side of the ocean to the Eco-Atlantic City, where you have the Great Wall of Lagos, the 1.8 kilometer long protective barrier against that city. And I want to go back to earlier. So this is 2017 when they built the wall. You could see the image, and this is 2021. You could see where the water has reached. Please can you go back to 2017? You could see these are communities from the satellite. These are people's community. This is 2021. You could see where the water has reached. So this is an example of how coastal erosion also, affects millions of people in Lagos. And according to the satellite investigation, people have moved here as they've relocated here. So this is, how Lagos State government essentially is approaching the climate crisis. They are trying to remodel the city for an exclusive few, while trying to also, push away the poor. Lagos has become one of the most expensive real estate markets on the continent. This is from the piece. Thanks to its increasing commercial values and expanding multi-billion-dollar GDP, but the growth is papering over the cracks. As the economy expands and luxury estates rise, the foundation weakens and is ready to sink. In 2021, when this is by the Lagos State government itself, in the 2021 climate risk assessment, the Lagos State government acknowledges that 12.9 million residents are vulnerable to climate impact. And I said earlier that we have about 20 million people living in the state. So if the government is saying 12.9 million residents are vulnerable to climate impact, representing almost half of the current population and more will be affected as population increases. As more as population increases. So essentially, as we found out in the investigation, Lagos is headed towards a climate catastrophe and nobody's doing anything about it. Thank you.
Okay.